There are sounds, scents, and fleeting moments that only those who lived through the 1980s truly understand. It was a time when life felt simpler, yet somehow magical. Today, let's rewind the tape of time and uncover 100 forgotten memories. The little details that bring 1980s America back to life in all its vivid, unforgettable color. With $17,000, you could raise a family decently, buy a reliable used car, and still have a little money left over for a Friday night movie. It sounds modest by modern standards, but the money had weight and stretched farther than it does now. Most people back then lived simply, with less pressure for luxury or high technology. People dreamed of privacy and a house that had a second bathroom, not a mansion. The typical house cost about $80,000 then, giving you room to breathe with 3 bedrooms, real wood cabinetry, and shag carpet in at least one room, along with a backyard big enough for grilling and a slip-and-slide. At the same time, an event occurred that made American drivers cheer like they had won the lottery. Gas prices finally dropped below $1. Gas stations simultaneously flipped their signs, displaying record low numbers, often $0.89. When you drove up to the pump, it was a service experience. An attendant still came out, smiled, and cleaned your windshield until it was spotless. Drivers cheered and felt every trip became twice as sweet. The low fuel cost encouraged long trips and created a feeling of incredible freedom, without worrying about how fast the meter was jumping. At this price, every weekend getaway became much easier and more feasible for families. A grocery shopping trip cost around $60, and that was enough to feed a family of 4. Food back then wasn't considered a luxury item, but simply something to sustain you. Milk was about $2, bread was under $1, and ground beef was closer to $1.30 a pound. You could still fill up a cart without breaking the bank. Although coupons were still used and certainly helped, fresh, local food was the default standard. The important thing was that you were guaranteed enough food for the whole week without having to calculate too much or feel financial pressure. Before the GPS and smartphone era, road tripping in the 80s meant you had to use a fold-out map. These paper maps were so large that when opened, they were the size of the entire windshield. This was the source of all family arguments as you battled with your partner over which exit to take. The glove compartment was always full of old, crumpled maps from previous trips, a repository of family travel history. If you got lost, you had to pull over and ask a local for directions. If you reached your destination without getting lost, it was considered a proud achievement for the driver. Long road trips in the 80s were always memorable. You loaded up the car, fought over the map, and headed to places like Florida, Disney, or a cheap motel with a pool. Along the way, you would play Road Trip Bingo, a classic non-tech game, to kill time instead of staring at a tablet. Meanwhile, people ate gas station peanuts until someone got car sick and threw up all over the back seat. But when you saw palm trees appearing through the window, that was the sign of magic and the joy of arrival. The 80s saw children move freely in the back of the station wagon or family car. Wearing seatbelts was not prioritized or strictly enforced as it is now. Kids were free to move around, glass windows were cranked down by hand, and mom was usually busy handing sandwiches up from the cooler to the front seat. The family dog drooled in the wind, enjoying similar freedom. Those moments are remembered as moments of freedom and the joyful chaos of the family in the spacious station wagon. Many families also didn't bother locking the front door, or they gave the house key to the neighbors to watch the house or feed the cat while they were away. You would welcome them in if they knocked. This trust was the foundation of social life at the time, a mutual reliance that didn't require alarm systems or surveillance cameras. Trust was stronger than technology, shaping a sense of community closeness and safety, where there might be a fresh pie waiting for you on the counter when you returned. Even when traveling, people trusted locals when asking for directions, showing that the level of trust between strangers was very high. Community trust was so high back then that locking the car was sometimes optional. Some pickup trucks didn't even have door locks. When parking, you simply stuck the key under the sun visor without worrying about anyone touching it. This trust was stronger than any security technology. Today, we need a password to start the microwave. But back then, trust was the most valuable asset. People worried less about car theft, and the convenience of not having to lock the car was prioritized. This habit reflects a sense of community safety and trust that has nearly disappeared in modern society. Air travel in the 80s was still an event. Passengers were treated kindly and served hot meals on a tray. You had legroom without needing to do yoga. Kids were given free wings by the pilot. No one paid for luggage. Traveling by plane back then felt like a grand occasion, not a tedious chore like today. Picture a burst of bold colors, bright orange, avocado green, and mustard yellow stacked neatly in every kitchen. But what truly defined Tupperware was the social ritual surrounding it, the Tupperware party. These gatherings brought mothers together, often ending with new containers that would never be used yet. Somehow earned a permanent spot in the kitchen drawer. With mismatched lids that never quite fit, Tupperware became both a household staple and a cultural phenomenon. Among these major memories, which detail touched you the most? Share your personal story because your memory is a legacy that lives on forever. The Swatch Watch wasn't just a timepiece, it told the world who you were. They came in neon colors, jelly straps, and sometimes you would wear two at once if you felt truly daring. You wore your Swatch to the mall, the arcade, even church. And somehow, they always smelled like plastic and strawberry lip gloss. This watch was a mandatory fashion item expressing a bright and liberal personality. You ironed them flat, wore them until they were worn out, and never threw them away. Whether it was AC/DC, Journey, or Van Halen printed on your chest, that was your crew. These concert t-shirts were how you expressed your strong personality and passion for music in a crowd. They were a symbol of belonging, a way to tell the world what kind of music you supported and who you were. It was like a badge of honor. The older and more tattered, the more valuable it was, showing loyalty to the band. Saturday mornings had a distinctive smell, the smell of cereal and freedom. Cartoons ran from 7 a.m. until noon, and you never dared to miss a second. You sat cross-legged right in front of the TV, holding a bowl of sugary Captain Crunch, hypnotized by Thundercats, the Smurfs, and G.I. Joe. Interspersed were constant toy commercials making you beg your parents. This was your absolute quiet time, and no one was allowed to bother you. If you missed an episode, you missed it entirely because there was no streaming service or DVR to save it. When MTV launched in 1981 with the phrase "Ladies and Gentlemen, Rock and Roll," it was like someone had turned America to color. From then on, music videos became just as important as the song itself. Suddenly, bands didn't just need to sound good, they also had to look cool. MTV permanently changed pop music culture and was the pulse of 80s style. Every kid was glued to the screen watching icons like Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Prince. The channel was the epicenter of youth culture, shaping fashion and music trends in the blink of an eye. Recording your favorite songs from the radio was an art that required patience and high skill. You had to place your thumb on the pause button, wait for the DJ to stop talking, and time it perfectly to start recording. If you timed it correctly, you felt like a genius, but if you got it wrong, you'd hear Casey Kasem yelling over the intro of "Take on Me" for the 100th time. These cassette tapes were precious personal possessions, often used to create the perfect mixtapes for your secret crush. Every Friday night meant wandering through the VHS shelves with the family, praying the movie you wanted to rent wasn't already taken. You picked a VHS tape, some Milk Duds candy, and hoped that no one forgot to rewind the tape. The trip to Blockbuster was a family event, a small ritual that made movie night special, full of magic and choices. It was the joy of the hunt and the thrill before discovering a new movie. Be kind. Rewind wasn't just a cute slogan, it was a moral obligation for the video renter. If you returned a VHS tape to the store unrewound, you would be fined and given a dirty look by the employee. Everyone had the responsibility to rewind the tape so the next renter didn't have to wait. Without a dedicated rewinder, this could be time-consuming, but it was part of the video rental experience. This demonstrates one of the small rituals that made Blockbuster unforgettable: part of the social contract between the renter and the store. Car interiors had a distinctive smell of warm vinyl and crayons. You sat on sticky bench seats and had to crank the window down by hand. There were no airbags for safety or convenient cup holders. Instead, you burned your leg on the metal seatbelt buckle under the sun. The car back then was just you, the road, and your dad's immortal quote, "We are not stopping until we get there." Everything was designed to be durable and practical, rather than for maximum convenience. The 80s had no texting or cell phones. You had to use a payphone, and a quarter was enough to make a local call. Every street corner or gas station had a scratched metal box with a dangling cord. If you forgot the phone number, you had to hope they answered, or stand there flipping through the shredded phone book chained to it. If you missed the call, they would call back. That was the social network of the time, and somehow it worked very well, forcing everyone to remember phone numbers. In 1985, Coca-Cola made one of the most beloved marketing failures in history when they changed the formula and launched New Coke. The American public hated it with a passion, considering it a betrayal of the classic brand. Protest lines were formed, complaint letters piled up, and phone calls flooded the company. Just 3 months later, Coca-Cola had to concede and bring the old formula back, renaming it Coke Classic. Before cable TV, adjusting the rabbit ears antenna on the huge wooden TV was a shared family struggle. The heavy TV had a wooden cabinet as heavy as a refrigerator. To get a better signal, you had to wrap the rabbit ears in tinfoil. Sometimes, you even had to punch the side of the TV to make the picture stop jumping. Finding the perfect angle to catch your favorite show, like Saturday morning cartoons, was an art. Without a remote control, you had to get up to change the channel or adjust the antenna under your dad's direction. The movie theater experience in the 80s had unforgettable characteristics. The floor was always sticky from spilled soda, and the buttery popcorn smell was strong. You bought tickets at a glass booth and chose a seat that had no cup holders. If you tried to sneak candy in from home, that was a secret mission. The worst thing was, if a tall person sat right in front of you, you would have to lean to the side through the whole movie. Despite the lack of modern convenience, the feeling of watching a movie together in the theater was an irreplaceable experience, a worthwhile social event. These scraps of paper were folded into complex origami shapes, sometimes sharp. They were labeled red now and slid across the desk like secret missions, requiring discretion and speed. This was the sole form of social connection, connecting friends in the classroom. If caught, the note was thrown straight into the trash immediately. Creating complex folds was also an art hidden within the classroom. Although getting caught passing a paper note usually just led to the note being confiscated and thrown in the trash, there was a much worse scenario. That was when the teacher didn't just throw it away, but read the content out loud in front of the whole class. In that moment, all your dignity evaporated, and you just wanted the floor to swallow you up. This public humiliation ensured that you would think twice before sending flirtatious messages or criticizing the teacher next time. In 1981, IBM released their first personal computer, and it looked like a boxy little spaceship. Businesses loved it, schools started experimenting, and those in the tech world declared that it had changed everything. Turns out they were right. This computer provided unprecedented computing and data processing capabilities. However, despite its breakthrough technological power, it still couldn't beat simple Tetris on a Game Boy a few years later. In 1984, Apple aired its famous Super Bowl commercial to introduce the Macintosh. The ad aired one time but went down in history. It depicted a woman in red throwing a hammer at the Big Brother screen. That moment permanently changed the PC world. It was a bold, weird, and totally unforgettable message, challenging the dominance of traditional computers. The Macintosh symbolized innovation and the start of user-friendly interfaces. When the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, launched in 1985, Mario wasn't just a plumber, he was a hero. Games like Duck Hunt, Zelda, and Punch-Out came in gray plastic bricks. To make them work, you had to blow into them. This was a shared ritual for every gamer back then, and when they worked, hours of your life would disappear. The NES brought the arcade experience into the living room, forever changing the gaming industry. You recorded your favorite TV shows onto white VHS tapes, labeled them with a marker, and stacked them next to the VCR. The entire bookshelf was filled with these homemade TV archives, some perhaps still sitting in basements, half-labeled and dusty. You waited all week to watch The Cosby Show or Cheers. If someone accidentally or intentionally taped over your precious late-night movie, that was considered grounds for war, an unforgivable crime. Trapper Keepers were the status symbol at school. They came in loud colors, had Velcro flaps, and matching folders. If your Trapper Keeper had unicorns or race cars on it, you were considered royalty. You opened it up in class like a secret briefcase, and when the Velcro lock ripped open, the hissing sound was loud enough to silence the entire room, drawing everyone's attention. Choosing the perfect Trapper Keeper was an important back-to-school ritual. Among these school supplies and toys, which one did you own or covet the most? Let us know your precious artifact. In the 80s, you didn't buy games, you rented them. One cartridge at a time, from the corner store or Blockbuster. You didn't have save functions or complex walkthroughs. You only had a mere 48 hours to beat the game, or cry trying to do it. If someone rented the game cartridge you wanted, you just had to wait. The feeling of time pressure and the urgency to complete the game were an essential part of the gaming experience back then. In 1983, Cabbage Patch Kids caused actual riots in stores. Parents fighting in the aisles to grab the last doll. Every chubby-cheeked doll had a unique name and a fake birth certificate. Owning one wasn't just having a toy, it was proof that you cared enough to elbow strangers for your children. This was an unbelievable shopping craze. The trend of home perms and using Aquanet created big, loud hair. Bangs would be teased and sprayed Aquanet straight up to the point that they could block a radio signal. This hairstyle was big and proud, truly reflecting the bold spirit of the 80s. Curly and voluminous hair from home perms often had a strong chemical smell that lasted for weeks. Jelly shoes hit the playgrounds like neon raindrops. They were made of transparent plastic, clear, sparkling inside, and had a smell that you can still remember. They squeaked and chafed the feet. After a day in the sun, they almost melted. But if your feet were sparkling purple, you felt like the coolest kid at recess, because in the 80s, style always won over comfort. Socks pulled up over your pants was a popular style, especially when preparing to attend aerobics class. Thanks to Jane Fonda workout videos, exercising became a fashion show. Neon tights, bright leg warmers, and leotards were standard attire. You weren't just working out, you had to look like you were about to perform on a synth-pop stage. The Ford Escort was a familiar sight that dominated every road. It was known as a small, boxy, but incredibly reliable car. The Escort came in notable colors of the time, such as mustard yellow or seaweed green. Your mom drove it to the market, your friends might accidentally drive it into a ditch, but if you inherited an Escort as your first car, you were set. It wasn't a glamorous car like the 50s Chevy Bel Air, but it was a reliable workhorse that made its name through endurance. Cash ruled in the 80s, and you kept your money in a nylon Velcro wallet. When you opened this wallet, it created a loud ripping sound, loud enough to silence the entire room. And in a strange way, that loud sound made you feel wealthy, even if you only had a few dimes. Using paper money, coins, and handwritten checks was standard, and the sound of the wallet was the symbol of money. Whether you loved him or hated him, Ronald Reagan's voice, hair, and optimism filled the 80s. He called the Soviet Union the evil empire and promised morning in America. Somehow, he made jelly beans feel presidential. His speeches were pure Hollywood style, and so was his delivery. His optimism influenced the general spirit of the decade. Every fridge in the 80s had alphabet magnets. Kids used them to spell out weird messages. Adults used them to post grocery lists. And mysteriously, at least 3 important letters were always missing, usually Q, Z, and a second E. They were an indispensable part of kitchen decor, creating simple games and communication for the family. What would you bring back from the 80s? Let us know what you want to see in the next video. Every kid had a plastic lunchbox with a matching thermos. Your lunchbox, printed with Scooby-Doo, Transformers, or Strawberry Shortcake, said everything about you. If you forgot to tighten the thermos lid, your soup would leak, and your PB&J sandwich would taste like tomatoes by lunchtime. This was one of the biggest disappointments of childhood, but the lunchbox remained a personal symbol and an essential item. In 1983, McDonald's introduced the Chicken McNugget nationwide, and America never looked back. Dipped in BBQ or honey mustard sauce, they were crispy, addictive, and perfectly bite-sized. Kids begged for them, and adults secretly snuck a piece out of the box just to check the temperature. Just one taste and you were instantly hooked. The McNugget became an iconic fast food item of the decade, reshaping McDonald's menu and children's eating habits. Fast food in the 80s was often wrapped in tin foil, not paper boxes like today. It was cheap, salty, and tasted awesome after a baseball practice. Fries came in paper bags and milkshakes were so thick they would bend your straw. You couldn't leave without shoving a few ketchup packets in your pocket. Fast food back then was a simple, uncomplicated reward, full of flavor after exhausting sports activities or long school days. The foil also helped keep the food warmer than modern paper boxes. Are you still with us on this journey of nostalgia? Don't forget to hit the hype button. It's the best way to help our channel grow. The clapper device turned light into magic in your living room. Clap once, lights off. Clap twice, lights on. Every commercial ended with clap on, clap off, the clapper. This device gave a sense of being futuristic and modern. That was great, until it turned on the lights in the middle of the night just because your dog sneezed. This item is a prime example of simple, sometimes quirky technology utilities, representing the beginning of simple home automation devices. School lunch in the 80s included rectangle pizza, warm milk in a carton, and maybe a fruit cup with half a peach floating in syrup. You ate it on a plastic tray under fluorescent lights. Although it doesn't sound appealing somehow, it was still the best part of your day. This special pizza is a flavor every 80s student remembers. In 1980, CNN became the first 24-hour news network. Suddenly, the news didn't stop after 6 p.m. You could turn on the TV anytime to get updates from around the world. For better or worse, it changed how Americans consumed information and how often they worried about global events. Constant news made people feel the world was both closer and scarier. In 1986, the Challenger space shuttle disaster stopped the country. Millions watched it live, including students, because teacher Krista McAuliffe was on the flight. This event should have inspired the next generation, but instead, it was a heartbreak that America never forgot. It was a rare moment when the entire nation collectively witnessed a tragedy, shaping a sad collective memory and raising concerns about technology. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. This event was so significant that even children in America felt it. For years they had watched movies, practiced drills, and heard speeches about the Russians in the Cold War. Suddenly, the Cold War felt like it was cracking. Reagan's challenge, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, no longer sounded like a movie line. This was a historical moment proving that optimism and freedom could win. Trivial Pursuit, launched in 1981, took over every living room. This was the board game that made you feel smart. People played for hours, arguing about the answers, bending the rules. However, you were always humiliatingly taken down by the arts and literature category. This game fostered family competition and was a popular form of intellectual entertainment. Choose Your Own Adventure books turned reading into a high-stakes adventure. On one page, you were a detective. 5 pages later, you were eaten by space ink. You always had to use one finger marking the previous choice. Technically, it was cheating, but the universe needed you to survive to continue the story. These books offered a sense of thrill and unique interaction. Back to the Future wasn't just a movie, it was a blueprint for the future. You dreamed of driving a DeLorean hitting 88 miles per hour, sipping future Pepsi, and landing in a place with hoverboards and flying cars. Time travel felt totally possible as long as you had plutonium in a mall parking lot. This movie sparked the imagination about science and technology. In 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark premiered, and Indiana Jones immediately became every kid's adventure hero. His hat, the whip, and his fear of snakes. The movie made archaeology cool for the first and perhaps last time in history. It created a new classic heroic archetype based on courage and intelligence. In 1984, Ghostbusters dominated pop culture. Everyone was quoting the movie, "Who you gonna call?" Drawing the logo on notebooks. Kids all wanted their own proton pack. If your parents bought you the plastic set with the foam sprayer, you were the coolest kid on the block. The funny ghost logo became a ubiquitous symbol. Although the TV dinner was introduced in 1953, its convenience was still popular in the 80s. You could power up a Salisbury steak or reheat a burrito in the microwave. This convenient packaged dinner was heated on a tinfoil tray. They were a quick meal after a long day, often eaten right off the tray while watching TV. You couldn't resist the cereal boxes because they often came with a little toy inside. Cereal commercials were constant throughout Saturday morning, making you beg your parents to buy them no matter what. The toys inside the box, although often cheap plastic, were the main motivation to eat the whole box of cereal. Reese's Pieces became hugely popular after the movie E.T. the Extraterrestrial premiered in 1982. Suddenly, this candy was cooler than M&M's. Every kid wished they had a glowing finger and a BMX bike after watching the movie. E.T. wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural phenomenon. The Sears Wish Book was Christmas printed on paper. This hundreds of pages thick catalog was filled with toys, gadgets, and dreams. You would circle everything you wanted with a red marker. Then you folded the page corner and left it somewhere your parents would accidentally find it. Half the fun came from flipping through the book, dreaming about gifts. The yard sale was a social event. Your parents would lay items out on blankets, haggling over old toasters and lamps. They drank coffee from foam cups. Meanwhile, you sold lemonade in Dixie cups and hoped someone would buy your old toys for a dime. It was a childhood business and social experience. You couldn't Google the lyrics in the 80s, you had to guess them. Maybe you sang "Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza" instead of "Tiny Dancer" until someone corrected you. Even when corrected, you weren't entirely sure because the radio DJ never repeated the lyrics. You had to look it up in your address book or notebook, where important information was recorded. Roller rinks were always packed. Disco lights, fog machines, and endless loops to the music of Madonna or Foreigner. If you held someone's hand during the slow song, that basically meant you were dating. These roller rinks were important social gathering and dating places. Lisa Frank brought rainbows, unicorns, and dolphins into the classroom. Her sparkly, vibrant, but that was part of the charm. Beanbag chairs weren't trying to be elegant, they were honest. Honest about what the 1970s really needed. A place to collapse, relax, and just enjoy the feeling. If you felt touched remembering any detail in this video, hit the like button and subscribe to Back to Yesterday to support the channel in continuing to preserve this legacy of the past. See you in the next journey of nostalgia